Hello everyone. On behalf of Red Alliance India and the First People, I, Ella, extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you to today's webinar on Telangana Net Zero Vision, Manufacturing and Corporates. It is my pleasure to be here as your host. We would like to extend our gratitude to our industry partners, Citi, and Advisory Council, Terry, for their immense support to organize this event. We'd also like to thank our esteemed guest speakers and the attendees for their valuable presence in today's webinar. Your active participation has contributed to making this event truly remarkable. May I now request Sri Kant Vadiga, Advisor, Infra Committee, FTCCI, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khan. Very good afternoon to all the participants, my co-speakers, co-panelists, and I feel honored and thanks India Net Zero Alliance for giving this opportunity to be the keynote speaker. Here, as you know, because of the elections, yeah, climate has changed. Things are hot here. Tomorrow is the election date, so we are in the midst of that. I'm not very sure how many people are very keen in listening to us today, but you are forced to listen to us. So, coming back to our subject, once again, very good afternoon, welcome to all of you. This particular seminar, this webinar on our responsibility of taking care of our climate changes, taking care of our future. I would say I would put it in that word that taking care of future is in hands as a responsible industrialist. It lies in it is we have to work in the with the global norms and we ourselves in India, if you look at India in the last decade or so, we have been seeing a lot of changes in every field, whether in manufacturing field, be it in our corporate field and all. So, in response to the pressing need of climate action, several countries have committed to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by adopting emission pledges. We as Indians, we have been committed to becoming a net zero emission by emission economy by 2070. As even more, we have more reasons to achieve this objective due to the strong vulnerability to climate changes and ambitious growth path. As we all know, India has been driving through as an agriculture-based economy. Now it is more of an industrial-based economy. So, increasing energy needs, growing population, large consumerism are the key reasons that are driving India's economic growth plans. At the same time, it has a greater responsibility on its shoulder to adopt a climate-sensitive approach. Coming back and talking about Telangana, yeah, because of it, huge growth both in industrial as well as in corporate field and services industry. Telangana, the significant share to the Indian GDP is contributing roughly tons of CO2 as per the NITI Aayog report. That state is gearing up towards its committed to net zero. Its recent zero emission truck accelerator, an innovative collaborative platform for industry to host pilots in zero emission, trucking aiming to develop zero emission corridors throughout the state, is a groundbreaking approach for shifting to revolutionize the freight transportation sector by aligning it with sustainability and net zero benchmarks. Taking this as a huge business in Telangana, state need to do their part in kickstarting more of such initiatives towards net zero. Corporate entities, we play a crucial role in achieving India's decarbonization goal, as they are responsible for nearly half of the country's total energy consumption. In response to competitive pressure, investor pressure, and reputational concerns, several leading corporates have already taken voluntary action to reduce their carbon footprint. In this particular area, during our panel discussions, I would like to highlight more on how the construction field, where we Phoenix belong from, how we are taking measures, and what are we contributing to reduce the carbon rating that I'll be discussing. So, given the above, it is the right time for us to take an action today's webinar, Telangana's net zero vision couldn't have arrived later. Today's session highlights the importance of net zero and aims to draw a roadmap on meeting our above objectives through discussions and deliberations. Please welcome in initiating the discussions for a cleaner climate. Now, with just a quick background about the evolution, we can talk about the Millennium Development Goals, where 8 goals established for 2000 in 2000 for the 2015 by the 191 UN member countries. The goals had 21 targets. Each goal had specific date to achieve the same. However, uneven progress and difficulty in measuring these goals did not help that to happen. Post formulation of the SDG by United Nations, which called for equitable and inclusive for all, the underlying guiding principle, the urgency call for action towards climate sensitive initiatives, became popular in balancing industrialization versus environmental consciousness. Building environmental consciousness in industrial development gained significance more specifically for developing countries like India. It is a challenging task for India to balance its growth ambitions to environmental protection. Construction industry currently generates 25% of greenhouse gas emissions and it needs to extract 220 billion of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to create a net zero by 2050. Buildings consume more than half of the electricity globally for heating, cooling, and lighting, accounting for more than one third of the energy related GHG emissions after adding building materials and construction. Due to the above reasons, without changing the way buildings are designed, built, and operated, it is not possible to achieve net zero. And hence, there is an urgent need for transition adopting cleaner practices. This can this can be achieved by completely eliminating emissions, required a decarbonization by 3 times faster for the next 30 years that we did over the past 30 years. Despite the intent and opportunities arising out of net zero decarbonization initiatives, we know for a fact that understanding where and how to start is the most demanding part. As of now, there is no blueprint for decarbonization. The path to net zero is fraught with challenges. In the scenarios, our today's seminar, I'm sure it would bring in more insights to adopt good practices, encouraging innovation products, supporting sustainable building materials, green cement, steel, efficient energy efficient products, water and waste reduction and management. This I'm talking about our construction perspective, and adopting a life cycle perspective products, material used during construction and operations involving building usages would help us a lot in reducing the carbon impacts. Companies face several obstacles in the journey towards achieving net zero emissions. Absence of transparent standards, lack of clear policy framework, high upfront cost, lack of technical expertise, and nascent state of some key technologies. Despite the audacious intent, many companies find it hard to take tangible steps due to these barriers. To tide away these challenges, companies can develop an actionable and robust net zero roadmap. This involves creating a detailed framework to critically assess emissions profile and setting relevant targets. However, this is an easier said than done, as different corporates operate in different segments and meet varied needs of customers. Companies need to consider the following factors while developing their net zero plans: nature of business, type of emissions, sources, national and local regulations, supplier and consumer influence, investor perspective, etc. Working with uh, entities specialized in design solution for construction manufacturing this will also make this transition easier. My suggestions through this platform, measures for government to move forward towards net zero are like regulation on net zero buildings in all new projects. Regulations can be in the form of fast approvals, etc., certification programs incorporating energy efficiency programs, developing awareness about the importance of net zero buildings to both industry and the consumers, and encourage circular economy, and regulations on emissions depending on the nature of product, etc. And most importantly, more than these rules and regulations, we, the industry, are taking responsibility and are making sure to adapt best of the practices which would reduce carbon emissions. And government has taken some noteworthy initiatives in the recent past, especially Telangana government, in creating a green environment, which are commendable. Improved last mile connectivity, encourage use of public transport, electric vehicle adoption, charging infrastructure within our buildings, and common infrastructures, industrializations, industrialization away from congested, heavily occupied areas. Adopting net zero is not only just a direct method to meet sustainable development goal. When you look at the SDG 17 of the SDGs, the SDG number 13, where they talk about climate action, which clearly insists our responsibility and what we are supposed to do, but forms the largest strategy of combating climate change and creating a sustainable, resilient future. By striving to achieve net zero emissions, it is possible to craft a path to better society, living with balances, environment, and economic growth. With this, I look forward. Once again, welcome all the speakers and other dignitaries present today. Would like to hear from you, and during the session, I will be sharing with you more about our practices and being the Phoenix being the very first company in adopting steel structures and the other building material which we are adopting for the environmental for the good of the environment. So thank you once again for patiently hearing me, and thank you Allah and other co-hosts for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much. Welcome once again.
Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Dr. Manish Kumar Srivastava, Executive Director, Climate Policy and Climate Finance, ready to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Ala, and also thanks to the Net Zero Alliance, City Group, for partnering uh, on this very important conversation focusing on Telangana's net zero vision and the role of manufacturing and corporates therein. I would, at this point, briefly stick to the context within which the theme of this discussion assumes a greater significance. Of course, the discussion would focus on a state's strategy to net zero vision and the role of private sector therein, but it has to be necessarily aligned and guided by the national and international strategies on climate change. As you all know, tomorrow the 28th COP would commence in Dubai. Uh, the key agenda items there are a global stock take of what different countries have been doing since Paris Agreement and what the progress is, and whether that progress is in line with the global goal of limiting temperature rise to 2 degrees centigrade, or possibly limiting it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. The general sense that everybody has is that the ambition is not enough, and countries would need to step up their efforts. Uh, uh, in doing so, it is expected that all countries should speeden up their mitigation actions and commitments, but also the developed countries should come forward, should increase their commitment and be honest about it, sincere about it, on providing finance and technology to developing countries. So that's the larger context, but within which India's commitment to the international community has two key elements. One is the long-term target of becoming a net zero emission economy by 2070, and the short-term commitment in the form of nationally determined contribution that is to be achieved by 2030. Now, this short-term commitment has many bullet points or many headlines. The most important ones of them are which are relevant to this discussion are first is the reduction in emission intensity of GDP by 45% from 2005 levels. Also to increase 50% the installed power generation capacity from non-fossil sources by 50%. This is a bit of a tricky and important target because it's more dynamic in the sense that Mr. Badiga pointed out that the energy demand is growing. So obviously the supply would have to increase, and so the overall installed capacity would increase. So this 50% is indexed to how much actually increases. So it's difficult to peg in a specific number, but different modeling studies suggest that by 2030, India would be needing somewhere between 800 to 1200 gigawatt of installed capacity uh, um, uh, to meet energy demand. So the non-fossil sources would be in the range of 400 to 500 or 600 gigawatt. That's a huge target. That also implies that there has to be an increasing demand and support for non-fossil sources, particularly solar and wind. The third key aspect is to achieve 2 to 3 gigaton of cumulative emission reduction through forestry sector. From this is between 2005 and 2030. A new commitment that India made in its updating of NDC last year was to introduce a mission called Life, which is broadly focused on lifestyle. And in that, the core idea is that of circularity and reducing the material intensity of life. So that's where a role of the corporate sector becomes extremely important, because eventually we would be needing a facilitative market which can allow consumers to make those choices that allow low carbon lifestyle. So invariably, the choices would be upon the industry to reduce the material intensity of production systems that would then create options for low material intensity consumption for people. So that's very important, and it is in this context I think this discussion of today is very important. Now, just a while ago, Mr. Badiga made an observation that, well, these targets are there, but this vision is there, but there is no blueprint. Now, I would slightly rephrase it by saying that last year in at COP, India submitted a long vision document to the international community, which is called the long-term low carbon development strategy document. And that document is basically India's approach towards how the net zero target for 2070 would be achieved, what would be the key focus areas. So, of course, it needs a lot of detailing in terms of actionable items on ground, but it nevertheless serves as kind of a blueprint of a blueprint sort of document, and that contains seven key areas. And looking at the panelists in today's discussion, I think we would invariably touch upon most of these seven key areas. So the first of them is to build a self-reliant low-carbon power system. The significance of this priority is that India relies a lot on imported coal to meet its power demand, which kind of undermines the ideals or aspirations of energy security. So the focus is on building a self-reliant power system. India being abundant in solar and also to great some extent wind energy. Obvious way forward is to transform India's power system to a low carbon power system. Second focus area is to have an integrated, efficient, and inclusive low carbon transport system. I think briefly Mr. Badiga talked about it, so I won't say much about that, but it is important in the context of rapid urbanization. We expect that in the next couple of decades, about 52% of Indian population would be living in urban areas. So this transport service becomes extremely important for decarbonization. The third element there is uh, adaptation and sustainability in urban design, efficiency in buildings. This is something that Mr. Badiga talked about, so I won't elaborate, and I hope I'm sure he will talk more about it when we get into the panel discussion. The fourth element is efficient and innovative industrialization decoupled from emissions. I think that is the core of today's discussion, how our production system, how manufacturing sector as well as corporate practices can be adopted, what kind of innovations we can adopt so that we become more energy efficient, more material efficient in a way that while our production increases, our emissions decline. That's very important. A new development in this direction in the corporate governance is the introduction of ESG guidelines. So that is, I hope we will have some discussion in the panel. There is a specific technological focus on CO2 removal and related technologies. This comes from many energy economy modeling studies, which do kind of a back calculation that if the world has to achieve the 2-degree and 1.5-degree target, and if we deploy all the latest technologies, advanced technologies for decarbonization that are available, we would still have some leftover emissions, and probably we would need negative emission technologies. That's a highly controversial topic, politically sensitive. And so the jury is still out, that whether we can have more some breakthroughs in other technologies, so that this politically sensitive and controversial technology may or may not be needed, but the modeling calculations still put an emphasis on that. India, of course, Niti Aayog has developed a strategic document on how one can go about carbon capture and utilization and storage technology, but it's very cautious and tentative at this point. Sixth is inclusive forest management. Forests serve as a very important sink, natural negative emission technology, if you like, we can call them. And India has already included a very forest management specific target in NDC in terms of cumulative carbon sink. Again, through nature-based solutions as offset mechanisms, that has been quite popular in the voluntary carbon market, and many corporates are using that. But how we can look at this strategy for the maximum utilization and benefit, that is something to be seen and discussed. And seventh is to mobilize technology capacity and finance from multilateral sources, but also through domestic regulation and changing domestic financial markets. So this is something where I think the corporate sector and the industry's role in terms of making it evident and explicit what kind of support is needed, where the specific technological needs in different sectors are, why the available technologies are not getting adopted, what are the capacity or finance or even technological barriers therein. That itself is an important step forward towards developing the blueprint for implementation at subnational and company scale. So I think it is in this context that I hope that today's event would come out with some very important and actionable insights, which are rooted in day-to-day experience of doing business and moving economy. So I would stop there and hand it over back to Ahala. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for presenting the thoughtful insights on the state action plan on climate change. I would like to take this opportunity to make a small announcement here. I would request all our audience to kindly post their questions in the Q&A chat box, and our speakers would address them after the panel discussion. So I'll just give a brief introduction of what is to go about in today's panel. So, in order to acknowledge the urgent need to accelerate the transition towards global net zero emissions, the Net Zero State Series is an initiative to champion sustainable development and create a positive impact on climate change. With three successful editions in Delhi, Chennai, and Surat, the series aims to further promote environmental awareness and action with more such events lined up across the country. At Telangana's net zero vision, we envision a world where energy consumption is balanced with renewable energy production, effectively neutralizing the carbon footprint. Through insightful discussions, knowledge sharing, and real world case studies, we strive to inspire a collective commitment towards achieving a sustainable, clean energy future. In today's webinar, we'll explore how organizations in Telangana are actively engaged in initiatives to combat climate change and strive towards achieving their sustainability goals. Without further delay, let us begin our highly anticipated panel discussion session for today. It is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who will share their insights and expertise on the topic at hand. Dr. Manish Kumar Srivastava, Associate Director, Climate Policy and Climate Finance, TERI; Mr. Ankur Chaturvedi, Associate Vice President, HSC Excellence and Quality, Imami Limited; Mr. Aditya Gurudanti, Head ESG and Sustainability Operations, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories; Mr. Indrajit Shaw, Senior General Manager, ESG, CBRE; Mr. Shrikant Badiga, Group Director, Phoenix Group; Mr. Murli Ravi, Unit Head, EHS, Pidilite Industries Limited; Mr. Prashant Tiwari, Chief Sustainability Officer, Amara Raja Group; and Mr. Prasanna Raghavan, Head of Finance and Sustainability, Ascot International Management, India. Dr. Manish Kumar Srivastava will be the moderator for the session. Over to you, Dr. Manish.
Thank you, Ala. I think we should right away get into discussion. What we are going to do is have a common question to all the panelists, and then try to build a conversation after their initial remarks, which I would request that all the panelists, if you could make your initial observations within 2 to 3 minutes, so that we have an opportunity to come back uh, on some of the points that you mentioned. So the common question that I have for all the panelists is to basically, I would request them to reflect on the how they see the role of advanced technologies its relationship with the imperatives of circularity, sustainable lifestyles, and net zero goals. Uh, it would be great if you could speak about it in the context of the state of Telangana, but also bring in the specific experience and outlook of the organizations that you represent. So, without further ado, may I call upon Mr. Ankur Chaturvedi from Imami Limited to share his perspective.
Thank you very much, Dr. Srivastava. I happen to be the only participant not based in Telangana. So that is not the only thing which sets me apart. Of course, the hair on my head is the other one. But coming to a more serious note, I represent the FMCG industry, and Mr. Aditya also would agree with me that in our process industries, when we talk about net zero, the major chunk of our emissions sit in our scope 3. As we talk today, I doubt if anyone in India has been able to measure their footprint, especially in the process industry like us, in totality, because scope 3 measurements are very difficult today. I firmly believe that if anyone says that they have uh, full control, there are various technologies available which say that will give you an accurate footprint. But when you consider scope 3, it becomes difficult. Scope 1 and 2, yes, most organizations who are conscious about it would be able to measure it accurately. But scope 3 remains a challenge. And that is where we need technology interventions. Uh, a very good practice that I would like to share is about measuring upstream and downstream emissions from transportation. Now, if you see the GST invoice, it has the address of the shipper, the address of the destination, and the vehicle number. So if you take the two addresses, put them on Google Maps, you get the exact distance in with the exact distance, not as the crow flies, but the road distance. The vehicle distance from Vahan, the centralized app of the Ministry of Road Transport, gives you the details of the vehicle in terms of what make it is, what is its capacity, what's its fuel, and the exact emissions. So that can give you accurate emissions. Your GST invoices can give you accurate emissions for your upstream and downstream. Similarly, there are other technologies available for other aspects. Some are still in the stage, but we will need to have technological interventions to measure scope 3. Now, having said that, I would conclude by saying that we should not get deterred by not being able to measure scope 3. If every organization, every commercial entity in India starts measuring their scope 1 and scope 2, scope 3 becomes automatic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi. Yes, you are right that a lot is still need to be done on scope 3 emissions, and the relationship between the scope 1 emissions of one company and scope 3 emissions of another is very interesting, that one could exploit upon. I would just want to say that our team, inventory team at Terry, has actually a database of about 300 parameters to measure scope 3 emissions from different sectors. So I think there is other, I'm sure other organizations might have also been doing the same. So there is in recent time, in soon we will have much more robust systems of scope 3 emission calculations. But I would now move on to, since you already referred to Mr. Aditya Gurudanti, that he might agree. So let me cross check whether he agrees with you or not, or if he has anything, something important to add. I'm particularly curious about his experience with the the lab, which is something that that is an industry that doesn't figure so prominently in net zero discussions. So I'm very excited to know your views, Mr. Gurudanti.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. Yeah, and at the outset, I would say that I totally agree with Mr. Ankur Chaturvedi's views. FMCG or any of the B2C industries generally, or process chemical industries specifically, has a huge chunk of footprint in Scope 3. Talking about pharma, ballpark around 25 to 30% is within our fence. More than 70% is outside our fence, and that's the same in with Pidilite also. I would assume. So number one is when we talk about net zero carbon vision, net zero carbon. Let us just focus on net zero carbon. Then, given the SBTI's definition, or given many of the best practices definitions, Scope 3 would have to be included. That's the good way to do it. We are talking about Telangana as a state, but then Telangana from as a part of the overall chunk of the nation. If we talk about from an economic standpoint, from a GDP contribution standpoint, or from an emissions standpoint, we cannot just talk about the state as a single entity, isn't it? There are a lot of emissions which go out of the state. There are, for example, if I talk about Scope 2, if I talk about electricity, ISTS is one of the major ways many of the industries are trying to achieve RE100. And as industries try to achieve RE100, their Scope 2 will reduce, and similarly, Scope 3 of some other company would reduce. And as we talk about ISTS, or as we talk about VPPA frameworks, or even if I talk about biomass and any other kind of biogenic emissions, uh, the value chain of such kind of advanced technologies are still not very very clear. Unfortunately, we have been working in Andhra and Telangana for a good chunk of time now, and still the regulatory frameworks, or the understanding, or the value chain security, if I may put on a very grander level, around biogenic emissions, around VPPAs, around ISTS, is still not totally clear. And adding on to the complexity of the SBTI's new framework, or the new announcement where they are saying that biogenic emissions might be included in scope 1. We have approached SBTI to get a clarification on whether those will be included or not. As of now, we have not received any answer yet. I'd be more than happy if any of our brethren here has received any kind of an answer, or any kind of an clarity on that. But if biogenic emissions are included in the scope 1 boundary, then achieving net zero for even from scope 1 and 2 would be a bigger of a task. Achieving net zero from a scope 3 perspective would even a further goal. It would even be a bigger or a further goal ahead. So my expectation, or my submission here to the panel is that these regulatory frameworks and these definitions per se have to be more clarified, so that across the value chain people can define or use a single way of talking. We need to clarify the lingo and the acronyms first, so that people start using them with more clarity. I have some bandwidth to take some time to do that. My suppliers might have. My suppliers of suppliers might not have. My suppliers of suppliers of suppliers, when I go to tier 3 or tier 4 suppliers, they might not have. Telangana as a state, or India as a country, still harps a lot on MSMEs and unorganized sector for a lot amount for the GDP contribution, and their emissions are the emissions which we have to calculate. We have to provide them a comfortable way to calculate the emissions, and provide opportunities for improvement, which then they can use to reduce their emissions. There lies the biggest chunk of opportunity, the lowest hanging fruit. And for them to make sense of around the overall ESG world, we have to make the definitions more simpler. The regulatory frameworks have to be more direct, so that they can implement it with ease. That's my submission, actually. Over to you, Dr. Manish.
Thank you, Sir Gurudanti. This is really very important point that you have mentioned, that we are still way behind dealing with the complex questions of how to regulate value chain from the decarbonization an environmental point of view. Our regulatory system evolved in the fractured manner where the administrative concerns of governing industrial growth dominates the way we build our regulatory framework. We are very strategies, these cross linkages, and how there are weak points in the supply chain, and how there are stronger points in value chain, how they could be hedged against each other. That's something that's very important. From here, I would go to Mr. Indrajit Shaw, who's a senior manager ESG at CBRE. Mr. Gurudanti mentioned that the landscape of ESG and its still complex relationship with regulatory framework is something that needs to be addressed. So I would, of course, Indrajit, you can speak to the initial question that I had asked, but I would also love if you could reflect on this point from your perspective as well.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. I think I'd like to start off by saying that, Ankur actually mentioned something very significant. When we as CBRE work with organizations in different sectors, one of the key things we realize is A, that different companies will have different levels of maturity, B, that scope 3 is something that's coming up quite a bit, and C, that in scope 1 and 2, the greening of the grid is something that's picking up quite a lot. Now, I will start off with the point that Aditya mentioned about the role of regulation and clarifications, right? What we are seeing in the ESG ecosystem globally is a very clear understanding that the plethora of standards, and I think we have got almost 600 standards across the globe with respect to sustainability and ESG. What we are seeing now is a consolidation of those standards. For example, we had something called TCFD and integrated reporting frameworks, which have now been combined. What we are also seeing is similar to how today in the financial world, you have a clear understanding of how you need to report your organization's performance. A similar approach is being taken for sustainability and ESG, where the International Finance Sustainability Board is actually bringing together different parties to create a global standard. Now, what that means is there is a global realization that we need to have a common understanding of what ESG is and is not. As you know, in a CBRE context, CBRE essentially works with clients on their commercial real estate. What we are trying to do is further simplify that, because historically we have done a lot of work in energy with energy reduction, but now what we are doing is looking at not just energy, but Aditya briefly mentioned about carbon. So we look at carbon across different pathways in buildings, in transport, in procurement, and in terms of the equipment in the buildings. Besides this, we also take a very structured approach to net zero. So CBRE as an organization, besides having targets to reduce its own footprint, actually has targets to reduce our clients' footprint. We plan to reduce by 79% per square feet the emissions of our occupier clients, which means the clients who are tenants in buildings, and by 67% per square feet for our investor and developer clients, the clients who build those buildings. Essentially, what we are trying to say is our organization is not satisfied just fulfilling our own sustainability objectives, but we need to have a larger responsibility to work with our clients to reduce their emissions as well. Now, in this context, what is becoming important is understanding where our clients or our client suppliers are. And this is where I think Ankur mentioned that we need metrics, clear understanding of measurements to assess what their current footprint is and where are the specific areas that we can reduce. So at CBRE, what we do is essentially take an inside out approach. So we would start with identifying a baseline and understand the data. And then we look at your assets. What are the specific areas that you can reduce your footprint? Have a clear path of what kind of initiatives you need to do to reduce them. And then look at how you can purchase green energy from the grid or other sources, followed by offsets. So this gives a very structured approach. If a company has a net zero goal of 2040 or 2050, we work backwards to say from 23 to 2040, what are the specific timelines and specific action items you need to take to be able to achieve that? I think that is the key message that I would like to leave this audience with is if your leadership has a net zero target, whether it's 20, 30, 40, or 50, you need to start defining the milestones and start defining the specific initiatives that you will need to do to be able to achieve that goal. That is what is going to make a difference from now to the future. Which companies successfully achieve those net zero goals versus which companies fall in terms of their achievement goals. So this is what I'll leave this audience with. And over to you, Dr. Manish. The last piece I'd like to talk about before we close is one of the key things we are seeing to reduce emissions is getting green energy. So think about ways for your organization to get green energy in a Telangana context. Historically, Telangana did not have very progressive policies, but now that's slowly changing. And there are ways for you to be able to source green energy either from the government grid or from private operators. And we help a lot of our clients do that. So please think about reducing your scope 1 and 2 emissions from a green energy perspective and your scope 3 emissions by having specific targets to your net zero goals and working backwards on which locations, which initiatives, and how much. So measurement is key, and knowing specifically where you can do this is going to be of paramount importance. Over to you, Dr. Manish.
Thank you, Indrajit. I think it is a very good glimpse that you have provided in terms of the kind of technical and statistical rigor that is required to prepare and plan for net zero transition, both from the governance point of view, but as well as identifying what are going to be the meaningful pathways. In that, I think it is also important for all our listeners to recognize this fact that as much as this rigor is expected from the technical service providers like yourself and us, it is also a lot of work for the industries to manage their data, to know about their systems more in more granular fashion, because that is where the effective and cost effective choices can be identified. So thank you for giving that snapshot also what is required. I would now go back to Mr. Shrikant Badiga. He did talk about few of the points already, but he touched upon building sectors. I would request Mr. Badiga to, for the benefit of our discussion and audience, if you could elaborate a little bit more on the net zero vision and its implementation from the perspective of increasing demand for both commercial and residential buildings. What are the technological choices and challenges there are?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Manish. I would like to start from where Indrajit was trying to tell. To like the our most of a commercial building we lease out to the multinationals. where the international property consultants play a very crucial role for us. What the surprisingly and pleasant thing, what is the Phoenix is, we are future ready. In sense, we have created our ambience, we have created office space in such a way that, as Mr. Indrajit was talking about, how do we achieve the net zero? Like he was talking about the person 76 and 78. We are future ready. We have made our office space in such a way. Of course, post COVID, we have learned a lot. Much before that, I would like to highlight that we were the first people to come up with steel structures, construction steel structures, which is a very good sign, which would reduce carbon ratings of using too much of concrete. That was way back in almost like 15 years now. We have been working with steel structures, best of the building materials, eco-friendly building materials, which would reduce the heat within the buildings, where we could reduce the usage of air conditioning, and recycling of water is a very very crucial thing in us. So hardly any percentage of water is let out. So these are the good practices what we're doing. But having said that, I would like to showcase that most of the construction companies here in Hyderabad, uh, throughout our supply chain, for example, when I said usage of steel structures, we've been talking to our vendors. Why don't you people come up with green steel? When we said green steel, they've been thinking, what is it? We said your production of steel, using reducing your the heat of your boilers, emission, so that you can reduce the carbon emission can be reduced. You can use alternate fuels. You can use renewable energy. In fact, we ourselves have invested in solar farms. We have invested in wind farms. So what we are trying to do is, as Phoenix, we are trying to invest in such an areas that would be future ready and would help reduce in this reducing the carbon dioxide impact in overall industry. Having said that, we have also been doing some licensing and trading with the so private agencies and government agencies, and seeing, so been encouraging people who could wheel us the renewable energy to our most of our projects. That is number one. Number two, as far as our most of our units, multinational units, whenever they ask for office spaces, they have been seeing like how are these been building constructed. See, I did not mention about this IGBC ratings of platinum rating, and that is all fine. But I would say practicing such good governance, such good practices for net zero ratings, which is what is required, not for this particular hour, for the future generation. We take it as a challenge, and we feel, when I give a green building, when I give a green environment, that is what is my asset we are going to carry forward to our future generations. And in our most of our buildings, much before government could really talk about EV vehicles, much of EV charging, we have planned our buildings such a way they are compatible and they can be modified with giving the electrical point within our building. That was most of clients were pleasantly surprised to see how readily the infrastructure is for them, and how they can commute within our buildings, and that is number one. Number two, we have made our buildings in such an strategical locations that people can commute easily by walk or by we have also provided electrical bugs from the nearest metro stations. And in certain cases, say around 10 kilometers of radius, we have bought some electrical buses, and we're providing because our campus, each campus has a population not less than 50,000 employees working there. So commuting from nearest, we've been encouraging them. We have been saying, we also been discussing with clients, if your employees can do some carpooling, if they can commute in public transportation, we can negotiate in a better as well. We are ready to do that as well. We've been doing that in couple of a building. They were in Micron now. They were very happy to see the we are encouraging. So these are the measures which we are practicing. not only saying distribute between, but it's been always the 10 to 12 years we've been doing that. That is number one. Another most important thing is we regularly do this electrical audit within our buildings. That helped us a lot into energy consumption of energy has come down, and also in the 30 to 35%. We have very good auditors advising on a regular basis, and we and two of our major buildings close to around 2.5 million SFT space. We have changed the entire lighting with inside and outside, so that we can work out on the power consumption. That was in that, of course it was in capital investment has taken more, but still we were happy that while during the operations it did help us in helping the environment. So such kind of practices are already there with us. And now I was talking about water, recycling of water. So Phoenix is the only project where, as we all of us know, when we obtain this EC, and later, while going in for the CFO, consent for operations, and later every year they come and inspect it. They were surprised to see that we are the only people that hardly any water is let out. Only during the heavy rains and all, we maximum will try to divert that, but maximum water we recycle and use it for our recycle water for all our other uses, and for horticulture, because most of our projects are huge landscapes, and we hardly, and for all the firefighting things, and also every resource we use, every part wherever we could do, we have been doing that. That is number one. Number two, apart from that, academically we are tied up with some good larger universities like JNU, Usmania, and all other colleges. We bring them and tell the students, even the schools also, we tell them, we show them the good practices we are making, and we insist. And whenever we bring them to our campuses, we make sure they're using our own buses to our campuses. And right from entering our campuses to the exit, we see to it, we give them all the environmentally protected, even while for having the coffees or teas, and recycled material. That's what we give them. So that kind of environment is already there with Phoenix, and we're trying to please the same thing to all of other co-developers also. So this is how we have put our our contribution as Physics, our contribution more than wealth making. We see it as an health making. Thank you, Manish. This is what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Badiga, for giving landscape view of the construction sector and the innovative approaches that Phoenix Group has been pursuing. I'm sure many of our listeners would want to know more about your efforts. Now, let me move to Mr. Prashant Tiwari. He's Chief Sustainability Officer at Amara Raja Group. The group already has a net zero plan, so it would be very interesting to know about their experience of developing such a plan. And there is one question that is from the audience that relates to renewable energy, and one of the major barrier for extensive, aggressive adoption of renewable energy is the storage technology. So Amara Raja Group also has some experience there. So I would like to invite Mr. Tiwari to share his perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Manish, first of all, for inviting me here. So I represent Amar Raja Group, and one of our flagship companies, Amar Raja Energy and Mobility. It was earlier called as Amar Raja Batteries Limited, and we realize the role of energy storage when it comes to the switch towards renewable energy or electrical mobility. So I'll quickly touch upon some of the things which previous speakers have already talked about. So coming to net zero, we are committed to net zero. Uh, I think, Doctor, you made a very nice point, decoupling growth from increase in emissions. So in last 1 year, we have reduced our absolute emissions by 8%, specific by 23%, whereas our revenue has gone up by 19%. So it is possible. Now, coming to the second part, so Amara Raja, you would probably know it by Amaron, but there are some other group companies also which are into infrastructure. So we have close to 800 megawatts of renewable energy installation across the country. We are also one of the, I would say, first few who have established this hydrogen refueling station in the state of in Ladakh, along with NTPC. So we also manufacture electrical EV chargers. So we are very much into this space. We are committed to net zero, but 2027, I think somebody spoke about taking smaller targets, time bound targets. So by 2027, we plan to reduce our absolute emissions by 30% while doubling the business. And if you look at our operations, 90% plus is scope 2 emissions. Basically, it is the bought electricity, and renewable is the way forward. But beyond that, we are also looking at electrification of material transportation. There are some refrigerants which we want to change, as well as moving to the fuels which are low on emissions, like gas in place of furnace or diesel, or even electrification of some of our ovens and furnaces. So these are some of the big ticket items which we have planned for next few years to uh, make sure that we achieve 30% reduction in our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. I think there was some nice discussion around scope 3, and like most manufacturing, 60 to 70% of our emissions also fall outside the boundary. But one good thing about Amara Raja is it's a very tightly integrated business. So there is a company which is called as Mangal Industry, which is a part of Amara Raja Group, which manufactures components like plastics, the casing which goes for the battery, as well as things like electrode, cathodes. So those things are manufactured by our own organization. The kind of control which we can exercise is much better. But beyond that, we have started engaging with our suppliers. It's a challenge. BRSR would want us to disclose our value chain emissions for 65-70% of our value chain emissions, and it's a challenge. When we started engaging with our suppliers, we realized that to start with, the data itself is an issue. I mean, they may not have the required expertise to even convert at times, the fuel and electricity into CO2 emissions, how those conversion factor matter. Sometimes even as simple as how do you convert KL into kg and kg into CO2, right? So we started those kind of sessions. There has been a lot of work which we are doing on engaging and trying to define a common vision. Very lately, we have started ESG data gathering from some of our key suppliers. We are facing difficulties, and now we are pushing them to take some targets. Now the buck doesn't stop here. It's very easy to demand something and then later on realize that nothing worked. So we are also trying to collaborate and identify some projects which are related to ESG. One of them key is net zero, of course, reducing our CO2 emissions, but also around safety and water reduction. So these are the three primary areas which we are looking at our supplier base. Second thing which I wanted to touch upon is around circularity. And I think you did ask this question, but not many people spoke about it. So let me talk about it. So in lead acid business, if you look at it, the battery major weight is lead. And today, 70% of the lead that goes into manufacturing our battery is from recycled sources. We are setting up a 1.5 lakh tons per annum recycling smelter in state of Tamil Nadu. This would take our recycled lead to almost 80-85%, and even beyond that. So this is one part of it. We are doing life cycle assessment to better understand our products, and if we can reduce the quantity of packaging, go for compostable plastic. So those are some of the initiatives, and we have started doing life cycle assessment for all our new product introduction. The bigger challenge, I think, everybody would be keen on is the lithium ion, the new energy business. And so far, if you talk about India, most of what you see in lithium ion is imported. I mean, there might be different branding, but most of them are just packing the cells which are being bought from China. Now we are setting up one of the biggest plant. I mean, when we made the announcement, it was the biggest in India, 16 gigawatt hour factory in the state of Telangana. But going forward, we have committed to 10,000 CR of investment in Mehboob Nagar, very close to Hyderabad. And this is where the challenge would come. I mean, going by any estimates, India would probably need around 600 gigawatt hour of battery storage capacity if you combine renewable energy as well as electrical mobility needs. And I'm sure almost every month you hear one announcement. Hyundai and all the automobile manufacturers, energy storage manufacturers, even the people who had no business in, they're getting into energy storage. And even if you add those up, there is still a huge demand. There is still a demand gap. So that's one part that India needs to quickly ramp up this energy storage, especially the new energy business. The challenge that would come is what goes into making a lithium ion battery, whether it is NMC. NMC is basically nickel, manganese, and cobalt, and the other technology is lithium phosphate. India is not so rich when it comes to these minerals, whether it is lithium, whether it is nickel, manganese, we have some 5% of it. Cobalt, almost 70% comes from one geography, which is Congo. So there are human rights issues, supply chain related issues, and those would demand us to look at the supply chain resilience very differently. What we are probably missing the buck is we are not focusing on the recycling. Every battery lithium ion EV vehicle which was sold yesterday, 6 7 years down the line, it will land up as I mean, as a waste. I mean, if we can call it a waste, and if we are not designing the battery for ease of recycling, or if we are not having enough recycling ecosystem, chances are we would get those batteries, we will send it back to a country like China, and then buy pure lithium compounds from them and manufacture cells and batteries here. And that would be unfortunate. If you look at the kind of trade deficit we have with China today, 75 billion US dollars. So that would be an unfortunate thing if we don't tap upon this opportunity. However, this ecosystem and the focus around creating that recycling ecosystem is something which we should start looking at right now. We may not have scales, so investments would probably precede the returns. But this is one area we would be definitely looking at. The technology park which we have announced would be working not only on developing technology but also putting up that's recycling ecosystems. So I can talk more about it, but I think in the respect of time, I'll just hand it over back to the Dr. Manish.
Thank you, Prashant. I think you made a very, very important point that when we think about long-term targets, the intent and strategic designs for creating a supportive ecosystem has to be implemented today. And that's very important. And also, it's important to link the imperatives of decarbonization with the broader imperatives of strategic economic choices which are in national interest. So thank you for highlighting that point. Now let me move to Mr. Prasanna Raghavan. He's Head of Finance and Sustainability at Escort International Management India. Uh, um, there was a reference to the financial world, and I would request Mr. Raghavan to also touch upon the financing aspect of mobilize of introducing sustainability principles in business and building design. So over to you, Mr. Raghavan.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think all of you have touched upon various things we should be doing to kind of make this country and especially India as a state and the world a net zero. But let me start by telling you that I come from an industry which is considered the most unsustainable, that being hospitality. So I have been in this industry for over 25 years. And over the years, I have seen the industry go from being the most most unsustainable to making all the possible things to ensure that they become sustainable. So let me start by that. And definitely, I think finance as a department plays a very big role in making a company sustainable. Because when I go to any of the conferences, they always say, or they always say, finance is one department you should never go to, because when you go to them, they'll tell you it's not possible. But when it comes to sustainability, it's good to have a finance person heading it, because you make it that much more easier for the company or for the organization to push your sustainability costs and goals through, because you know that the end result is going to be positive. So when you come to hospitality, and I'll specifically touch upon Telangana's first, because we have in Gachibowli, we have one of our properties called Oakwood, Kapil, Hyderabad. So there have been over the last, so we've been doing this the so-called, the movement towards sustainability in a big way for maybe about 10 years, but maybe in the last couple of years, it's become more prominent. Like, for example, we take power from solar. So Telangana, somebody has just mentioned. So I sit in Chennai, which is Tamil Nadu, where wind power is in a big way, used across all industries. But Telangana, I think, is moving away from being, not so positive in terms of wind to being more positive in terms of using of wind power. So some of the things which I would like to touch upon is, like, we as a company, what we do to make it more susty. We call it susty in our company, because it's a nice word, rather than sustainability is too big a word for somebody to pronounce it. We call it susty. So some of the things which we do are things like, using solar power for the water heating system for our guests are using solar power. Then some of the other things which we do is, using used pipes to kind of put it at railings across the areas which is touched upon by the various the housekeeping trolleys, so that they don't get broken. I mean, the walls don't get broken. So when you look at the staff, or when you look at the guest, let us say, I mean, when you go to a booking.com, people have become more what should I say, more knowledgeable about sustainability, and how hospitality, or how you as a company are doing this. Because when you go to booking.com and you're a sustainable, or you're a green company, then you're given a higher rating. So you can see your company on the top with a green button, which means that you are either been certified as a green hotel. So today people have become more knowledgeable of what are the steps they should be taking, what the steps you as a company are taking towards sustainability. Because if not, there are a lot of clients who come and say, hey, what are you guys doing towards sustainability? If you're not, then the next time they will not come. And especially among the staff also. So people who are not so, I mean, people have been talking about the various goals of the country, the various ways of measuring it. But internally as a company, we've told the staff, and the staff have also come back and said, hey, what is my contribution? And they come up with a lot of ideas. Some of it might be very simple, as not printing something, or using something like a used paper, or paper on both sides to print. So these are some of the small things which make a big difference in a larger sense. So I think from a company's perspective, which is in hospitality, we are moving more towards becoming as sustainable as possible. And I'm happy to say that Ascot as a group, we not only look at a particular city or a particular property, but whatever we do, we try and replicate it across all our properties across the globe. So this is what I thought I should be sharing with everybody around. The panel has got doctorates. The panel have got people who from various industries. But I thought, let me start by saying how unsustainable as industry we are, to how we are moving towards the sustainability part of it. Thank you so much, Dr. Manish. And yeah, if somebody's got any questions, more than happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Raghavan. It's very informative to uh, uh, know about your experience, and I think that's something that requires a lot of experience sharing. Many others would like to learn from you. So I'm looking at the clock. So I would uh, pick few questions from the audience. They are, of course, very specific in different sense, but there are two common questions that can represent all those questions. I would pose those two questions to all our panelists, and would request that while responding to those questions, you also make a brief kind of concluding observation or a message. What would be important thing for Telangana to go forward on its net zero vision? So the two questions that in one way or other our audience has asked is the question about transparency and accountability in terms of what the industry is doing. How do we ensure that there is accountability in what is being reported? And the second question is, how can uh, the policy change be uh, introduced, or what are the policy changes that the Telangana government should bring in to build on and expedite the experiences of the companies, at least what we have learned today or heard today. So these are the two broad questions that our audience has asked. I would go probably in a reversed order and request the panelists to be brief in their response. So again, Mr. Raghavan, quick 1.5 minute from you.
Yeah, sure. So, if you go back to questions, I think we all will agree that something about people have spoken about accountability. People have spoken about there's some question on the government policies. So, the first thing I would like to say is, what are you as a person doing towards sustainability? Do you understand sustainability? I mean, what is it that you're doing? I mean, we can always go back to government policies. I mean, so on an everyday basis, I mean, I'm just talking from me as a from an industry, because from an industry we don't as hospitality people understand whatever is about government policies and what the government is going to do, how things are going to change in Telangana. I think the most important thing is, what are you as a person going to do? And I think the big takeaway from this entire panelist or this entire session would be that, what if each and every person went back and made one change to their way of life, that would be the biggest, that would be, I would say, the biggest advantage or the biggest positive effect that any government policy can do. Policies can be made everywhere. Policies suggest everything is on paper. But if each one of us made that change, if each one of us here sitting in this panel went back and made that change, that would be the most positive government policy that would be made. I think I would love the other panelists to have a different view on policies, because I'm not going to talk about policies. I'm going to talk about everyday life and what changes we can make towards that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. I think democratizing sustainability is what you are asking and suggesting for. Mr. Tiwari, your take on the two questions.
So I think I would kind of add to what Mr. Prasanna said, but uh, accountability needs to have first competence and capability to start with. I mean, why would industry do something wrong? So what is currently lacking? We don't have right people. And even in the existing roles, whether it comes to supply chain, finance, procurement, HR, What role do they play? How do they impact the ESG outcomes of the organization? That understanding is lacking. So, like you use the word democratizing sustainability and having the right competent people managing some of this is the most important thing. Second would be looking at governance in a slightly bigger way. I mean, those board members, the board committees, financial discipline was always existing, utilizing the same forums to drive on non-financial performance of the organization could be second thing. And then there are mechanisms which are getting inbuilt. Accountability would happen. I mean, somebody is required to report on BRSR. There is a reasonable assurance. There is requirements which are going to come from regulatory framework also. So I think starting point would be building the capability within the industry around ESG, and then others would follow. The
Okay,
second question was about Telangana state policy with respect to renewable energy. I think the easiest thing in the straightforward way would be easier said than done, but banking mechanisms, I mean, I can set up more renewable energy as long as I have the banking mechanisms, and there could be other alternates also, increasing the energy storage capacity, coming out with the microgrids to improve the adaptability of RE. These are some of the things that comes to my mind. But policy has a huge role to play. Industry today can, take this renewable energy up in a very short period of time because it makes investment sense today, but lack of banking mechanism not only in Telangana but almost across the country is making those investments very high risk.
Uh, Thank you. It's you made a very bold statement by it's a new area of thinking also that perhaps carefully crafted personnel management policy can go take us a long way. That's very uh, interesting perspectives. Thank you, Mr. Badiga. Your take, please.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, see, for the two questions, in fact, when I was in my first while answering, I almost covered it. But nevertheless, first most important thing is once again, practicing is better than preaching. As I said, in our organization, most of our buildings, as I said, are eco-friendly. It's not only that, and right, like Prashant has rightly pointed out, how prepared are your people? It's not only one person system, but entire your people should also have the awareness of what the organization ideology is about. What are we up to? What is that? How future ready are we? So in our case, I will be more than happy to invite few of you, all of you, to our organization to look at the good practices we are doing. And every week we have such kind of sessions. We have under a Phoenix Foundation, we have made sure most of our employees would volunteer to get into such good practices as part of our CSR. So that part, I would also like to quickly tell that we are the first people to develop a modern crematorium in Hyderabad, which is also a green modern crematorium. So such is the passion, such futuristic are our planning. Coming back, that is long story short, but I would like to share with you all more and more of our good practices. That's number one. Number two, coming back to the policies, it is not only at the state level, but I have an opportunity to work with the central government as well as the vice chairman of Export Promotion Council for US in SEZ at the Ministry of Commerce, and also I'm the board of director of World Free Zones. In all these platforms, what I hear is how prepared are you ecologically or how futuristic. When they talk about they talk about this environment, how concerned are. It's not anymore about your balance sheet. It's more about how concerned we are, because they are looking for safety. Another most important thing which I would like quickly touch upon is, in future, if any war would happen, that would happen only because of water. So we've got to be very conscious and see to it we can avoid that particular big war because of water. Coming back to the policy issues, yes, in Telangana government, we in the past, in last year, we had when you construct an IT commercial building, you are supposed to give 66% of parking. We went back to the government. We spoke to first before going to the government. We took the views of our stakeholders. We explained them. When you are asking 66%, I am unnecessarily I'm wasting so much of space, cement, and capital. Why are you using when you're not using? We are encouraging you to come in the alternative mode of transportation, use electrical buses and all those things, and metros, the private transportation as well. So they were very even the IPCs also helped us. They were very flexible in this. Why not? Well, again we went back to the government. The government has reduced the parking space for IT buildings from 66% to 40 plus 10%. That's 44%. That's a good achievement, and it is an enabling act or enabling policy. The instructions they're giving. In future also they're saying if it is required, you construct. When I give an alternative parking space, I need not construct my parking space here. By that, I'm encouraging a utilization of public transport. I'm also reducing the carbon footprints at my place. So these are the different things what are already there in place. Once again, coming back to Telangana government, yes, they are encouraging the moment. As I said, we are investing in solar parks, we are investing in wind parks. So these kind of things they are encouraging, and they are also incentivizing when they're trying to bring their power to our states and do it. So policy wise, yes, it is not a one-time thing. You just ask them and give it. So as and when you practice, as and when as per requirement, the governments are very favorable, both the central government and the state government, and they're doing a lot of amendments. And most of the amendments is not restrictive. We need to understand these are all enabling as an enabling policies. So in future, let us again more and we'll have more and more sessions, do some brainstorming and present to the government what is the actual requirement in case we are missing it. So thank you once again, Manish, for giving me the opportunity to express my views. You're uh, you're on mute, Manish.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Bhatika. I think knowledge sharing and planning, that's absolutely important for building a larger community of sustainability promoters. May I come to Indrajit now?
Thanks, Manish. I'll keep it quite brief in the interest of time. For transparency, I think please measure. That's the key thing. If you want to go net zero, carbon neutral, whatever your targets, measure, be specific, make it granular. For accountability, set up a governance system. If you want to have ES as part of your organization, have an organizational structure, have teams at different functional, at different hierarchies, make sure they have targets, and there is a reporting mechanism. Okay, accountability will come when you have people, when you have processes, and when you have a reporting mechanism. From legislation for renewable energy, the Telangana State Electricity Regulatory Commission, TSERC, has issued the draft Interstate Open Access Regulations 2023, which is very recent and is going to or is planning to allow consumers with a contracted demand or sanction load of 100 kilowatt or more to avail green energy. So that's coming up. We at CBRE are helping our clients with that. As of date, you already have the option of getting green energy from TSSPDCL at 66 paisa per unit above the existing tariff if you want green energy from the grid. So these are two options for you to green your grid and make sure that you're transparent and accountable. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you, Indrajit. So Prashant's people needs to be put to a solid, well-governed institutional structure. Uh, that is where the good governance and effective policies will follow. And of course, they need to share knowledge among themselves. A kind of a theoretical proposition emerging from these final inputs. May I now turn to Mr. Aditya Gurudanti for your final remarks.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, yep. Sorry. A helmet fell down at the right moment. So yeah, I kind of agree with the views which have been presented until now. In our industry, we have a saying that sustainability is good business sense, and Just taking the example of Amar Raja battery, which was just presented by Mr. Prashant, we can easily say that that's a good example where your emissions can reduce and your revenue can increase. And going a step further, what we urge, or I urge the industries to use ESG as a business case for driving the growth. ESG can be quite profitable from a revenue or from a cost perspective. We have to just start asking the right questions. And here again comes the remark that we need to upskill the present capabilities and present leadership. We need to include ESG as a working strategy into the organization rather than keeping it as an additional chair or additional point along in the frameworks. And coming to the regulations, this kind of a business acting, this kind of a business sense has to be enabled by the regulations. For example, banking systems, for example, green finance, wherever and whichever way we can put ESG as a non-financial risk factor or a non-financial opportunity factor, which can actually drive revenue or reduce the cost of capital for a organization which is doing good in environment and in the net zero pathway, would be a good example. That's one example where the regulatory frameworks can actually drive the corporates, drive the industries to achieve the net zero vision, which is taken at a grander level from a country side. That's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. I think it's a very important point that you have made. Uh, there is always a business case to be made for sustainability. The task is to actually find it, and that may require innovations in regulation. So we should all be able to change. And now, let me turn to Mr. Chaturvedi. Although I disagree with what he had started with by saying that he is the lesser informed person, but even if that was the case, I think this session has been so rich in information and experience sharing that he would perhaps not say that again. So, on that lighter note, Ankurji, for your concluding remarks.
Yeah, Dr. Manish, I agree with you, and I said about my limitations because I didn't study beyond class 12th. So now that you know the background, I will say something very controversial, and I'm happy to uh, get all the blows later on one. But please, and I seek apology before I say this. Business is for profit and profit alone. If anyone says anything otherwise, three bottom line, the triple bottom line is the biggest lie that has been propagated. If there is no profit, a business will not survive. Profit for business is like breathing for you and me. If we stop to breathe, we are dead. So is profit for business. All of us breathe and we are alive, but none of us stay alive to breathe. So so this is about your first question about integrity. Now, if you do not, I am alive because I am breathing, but the purpose of my life cannot be to breathe. And that is where sustainability comes in. It is what I do when I'm alive, which defines me as Ankur Chaturvedi. It is not the fact that I am breathing. So that is the relationship between sustainability and profit. Now coming to the policy part, where the policy is required is that sustainability needs to be made profitable. And the government needs to make it attractive for a business. And there are some steps in the right direction. The other part, if I look at what India is doing, the biggest policy change or the biggest, I would say, thrust to ESG in India is the BRSR report. Now, what BRSR report has beautifully done is that it has created a pressure on all organizations to start working and seriously looking at sustainability. I'll give you my example. If we compare our report with our peers, and if something is being done by our peers, our investors, our board, our customers, everyone puts pressure on us to do the same. So we don't need a regulator to tell us that we need to come out with a net zero policy. The BRSR report itself creates that, and that I think is a beauty. And I think that's a phenomenal achievement, because of the first time in India there is a law where we are not bound by an inspector, which leads to a lot of other things rather than compliance to the law. Thank you, and apologies once again for hitting on the very popular and base of sustainability, the triple bottom line.
Thank you, Ankurji. I think you made a very valid point, and I think others also hinted towards that we need to change perspective. Yes, the short-term perspective of short-term profit has to be replaced by long-term profits, and those have to be considered not only in financial terms but also in non-financial terms. So that's very important perspective that we need to adopt. I think I don't have much to say in order to summarize. This has been a very insightful session. I have learned a lot. Uh, but let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for taking time and sharing your perspective. Obviously, 1.5 hours is too short to have a comprehensive coverage of rich experiences and ideas that you all have. But I hope we will have another opportunity to discuss these issues, these perspectives in more detail. So thank you very much for your time and sharing your insights. Now over to you, Ala.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderfully uh, hosted session. And I would like to thank our audience and panelists. And with this, we have come to the end of this virtual event. A special mention for Dr. Manish for superbly managing the session. Your expertise and guidance have greatly enhanced the quality of the discussion. Our gratitude to all the speakers for taking the time out for their busy schedules for this key industry initiative. A big shout out to our attendees as well for extending your time and support for the event. Thanks to our partners, Citi and Terry, for their immense support to organize this event. As we conclude this event, we assure you that we will be back soon with more exciting sessions. The floor is now open for networking. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.